No matter your age, your plan for retirement can start today. From the News Channel 5 Network, this is the Retirement Report.
Good morning. Welcome to the Retirement Report. I'm Hank Parrott, your host. We've got a great show on for you this morning. We're going to be talking about a number of things. Here's a couple of areas when it comes to estate planning that I want to touch on. One is a funny quote from Mark Twain. Thrift is a wonderful virtue, particularly in an ancestor, right? But just in case, what we're going to be talking about is, yes, you may receive an inheritance, what you might want to do there. There's some planning you might want to do with regard to inheritances and other windfalls that could be very important to you for a number of reasons. Another part, of course, is what happens to your stuff when you're gone. And for a couple, this is especially important when it comes to estate planning as well. What type of estate planning have you thought in terms of what that future might look like when one of you predeceases the other and that survivor, to make sure they're going to be okay, they're going to be able to attain and maintain that standard of living and quality of life that they've had up to that point. And in particular, as we get later in life, the things like medical expenses and other things that may come along, we want to make sure that we're able to cover those as well. All of that can be a part of estate planning, and it's so important to have the appropriate legal documents in place ahead of time. Okay, you don't want to wait until the house is on fire to buy the insurance. Okay, you want to get that planning done in advance. You can always modify it, amend it, change it as may be needed later. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about estate planning, and with me, my good friend, special guest, Russ Cook of Russ Cook and Associates over in Brentwood, Tennessee. Russ is a board-certified estate planning attorney. We've been working together for, gosh, I don't know, 15, 20 years now, I think.
Yeah, I'd say so.
I know.
Long time.
I had hair, and yours wasn't as gray.
Yeah, but you lost a lot of weight.
Thank
so
you
you're
very
doing
much.
good, man.
Yeah,
you're doing
it must
good.
be the dancing.
There you go.
All right, we're going to be talking about it. And, you know, one of the things about estate planning is it starts with the right documents. And a lot of times people don't understand it. For couples in particular, little things like you think, well, we're married, therefore if something happens, I can always, you know, everything comes to me, or I can take over whatever needs to be done. But if your spouse becomes incapacitated, this is one of the things that we've run into before, where you can, the different parts of probate, but where your spouse becomes incapacitated, if you need to access retirement accounts or do business for that person, that's not always going to be just because you're their spouse doesn't mean you're going to get to do that.
No, in fact, this is an integral part of estate planning, is being able to put together documents that allow you to control assets in the event something happens to a spouse. Power of attorney for health care and living will. Well, financial power of attorney,
right.
Power of attorney for health care and living will are very important documents to have. And when you look at the power of attorney, financial power of attorney, you want it to be flexible enough so that if you need to do advanced planning in order to qualify for Medicaid or maybe VA benefits, the power of attorney has to be able to have language in it that allows for you to do that type of planning.
That's an excellent point. This is one of the things that I see a lot. Clients will come in and they'll have do-it-yourself documents. They, got it from an office supply store or from, I don't know, some estate planning website or something. And so they download these documents and they fill in the blanks. And the problem is those don't always work. And what's I saved, I don't know, $75, for getting a power of attorney. But if it's not going to do what I needed to do at that time, it's basically it's worthless, because now I thought I had something that what I thought to be true is no longer true.
Yeah, and it's really very expensive if you end up getting one that doesn't work. In fact, I had a case where a client got one online and it did not have a proper notary signature, and so the power of attorney could not handle real estate.
Right.
And when the client's mom became incapacitated and we needed to sell the house, we couldn't. We had to go through a conservatorship in order for him to get appointed conservator in order to be able to sell the home, and that was a very expensive problem that resulted from the documents not being proper.
And they said there are so many instances like this. We ran into one many years ago. A much, it was just a simple little thing. Had a client that ended up, he had cancer. He ended up in a hospital. He was very concerned. He had a long-term care policy, but how to go about taking care of the long-term care, because they were saying after the hospital he was going to a rehab facility. And he said, my long-term care policy's in the lockbox, in the safety deposit box at the bank. His son went down to get it, and they wouldn't allow him access to it because the power of attorney that he had did not specifically state access to safe deposit boxes. Just these little things. Basically, he called me up. I had to go to the hospital. I had to go to, in fact, Russ, this is one of those that I got you involved, to do up a proper power of attorney, and then power of attorney document. And then I went to the hospital to get it signed, witness notarized, and everything, so I could go with his son to get the long-term care policy out of the safe deposit box.
Something very simple like that.
So these are the things why it's not just having the documents, it's having them drafted up correctly. Now we're going to talk about some other documents as well. We're going to talk about the difference between a living will, a revocable living will, and a will. Okay? I'm saying it all wrong here. Let me try again. A revocable living trust, I'm trainable. A revocable living trust and and of course your last will and testament. What's the difference between having a trust and having a will? So we'll talk about that, as well as the supporting documents we were just getting into: a power of attorney for assets, a power of attorney for health care, a health care directive or a living will, where you want to let people know what your end-of-life plans may be, or desire, wishes may be. But the most important thing comes to that of the difference between a will and a trust, and some of the things that you can do there, both for the benefits of yourselves, but also as far as getting everything in charge or in control there, but also for your children, how the best way to set it up for them, and some asset protection things you can do for them that are really important as well. So let's start with, and this is one of the things people ask. So I've got a will, and they're talking about probate, because it's amazing how many people think because they have a will that they don't have to worry about probate, and it's the exact opposite.
Yeah, it is the exact opposite. A will is not really effective until you have it filed at the court. So even though you have a will that you have thought would basically take care of distributing assets on its own, it's really not a valid legal document to do that until you have it filed with the court. And that process is called the probate process. It's requiring a family member, your executor, to go to court, file the proper documents to get appointed the executor, get her letters testamentary in order to distribute assets according to the language of the will.
So basically the will is a ticket to probate, not a way to avoid probate. If you are concerned, and then let's talk about probate a little bit, because here in Tennessee, I know most attorneys, and I know we've had this conversation, say, well, probate's not that big a deal. And the reason for compared to other states where it can be very expensive. So let's talk about probate though here in Tennessee. If someone has, starting with, if they just have a very basic estate where only real estate here, they're going to be leaving everything to each other and then to the children. What's probate going to be like when someone passes? What's that process?
Well, depending on how they have assets titled, usually when a first spouse dies, if everything's joint, then everything may pass to the survivor. So when the survivor dies, they have assets that they have to administer through the probate process. What that means to the family is that if you need access to those assets quickly, let's say to pay funeral expenses or whatnot, you're going to have to wait until the documents are filed with court in order to gain access to those assets. If you want to go ahead and sell the home, you have to wait until the will is filed in order to get the proper power to sell the home. Right. And so there is a bit of a delay that you're looking at the very least. Some of the other concerns that people have with probate is that they're having to disclose how their estate is being distributed, because a will published at the courthouse is public record. Also, you're having to, in some instances, depending on the county, disclose what you have in your estate, which is something that a lot of folks don't want to do as well. And then it also opens the door for other people who may not agree with the way that you've distributed your assets to come in and try to challenge the process, because the courts we've already opened a file in order to basically probate the will. And then if you have real estate outside the state of Tennessee, then you're having to probate that will in the state where that property is located. So you're going through maybe another probate when you're dealing with that sort of situation.
Okay, this is one of the things about probate. Okay, we're going to cover these again when we come back. We're going to talk about how this affects you and how it can affect you, and how you can in fact avoid probate if that's what you want to do. There is a way, a very easy way to do so. So join us here. We'll get into that and more when we return here on the Retirement Report.